Alright, let me just start this by saying, I love Far Cry 6. I've seen a lot of videos out there saying that it's creatively bankrupt, or the gameplay is boring, or this or that. Gameplay is really freaking fun, the story's interesting, I'm into the characters and I'm into the side missions, which I haven't really been able to say for a Far Cry game since 3, although Far Cry 5 had a good story, it didn't really pull me in like I felt like it was trying to. But here in Far Cry 6, the narrative, all of the villains, and all of the people that you work with are interesting. It's gripping, it's immersive. The world is fun to explore, it's amazing to be back on an island jungle, and the gunplay is fun. However, the weapons are terribly balanced. This is probably it's not even the worst Far Cry Sandbox, but it's the worst handled Far Cry Sandbox. Now, let's start going into that and talk about why I feel this way. Now, if you guys have not watched my video talking about the different ways that you can balance a video game weapon sandbox, I'm going to plug it in right here, and I'll try to put a link in the description below, although I tend to forget to do that a lot, so if I do, please forgive me. But you should really watch that video before you watch this one so you can understand the terminology I use. As I'm not really a professional game developer, so I just kind of make up my own names and taglines for things, so it's easier for me to explain them. With that being said, Far Cry, as a series since Far Cry 2, has always been a fantastic example of level up sandboxes. To give a brief description on what I mean on that, it means you start with shitty guns and you feel empowered and you feel like you're progressing as you go on throughout the game because you unlock better weapons, better versions of the weapons that you start with. In Far Cry 2, you start with the G3 rifle, which pretty much shoots BBs, it's inaccurate, the recoil is ridiculous, it's not really a viable weapon for the mid or even early game if we're being honest here. However, once you progress through the game and you end up unlocking the M16 variant that they have there, you have that nice little optic on it, so you control range a lot better, it does a lot more damage, and because it uses triple burst, the recoil isn't as noticeable as it is with the other assault rifles in the game. You start with something shitty, you get to something stronger, and that makes you feel stronger as a result. But perhaps my favorite examples of a level up weapon sandbox would be Far Cry's 3 and 4. Now, without divulging or going all into the game's entire weapon sandbox and explaining how it does this, again, I've done that in the past, and if you want to see that, go look at other videos. But for the sake of this video today, let's look at the assault rifle categories in the starter weapon and in the final weapon, just like we just did with Far Cry 2. Now you start off with the AK-47 in both Far Cry's 3 and 4, and in both games it is a completely viable weapon, all throughout the game. The damage is good, the recoil is pretty controllable, and you get a decent capacity. However, you can't upgrade it like you can other rifles. So for example, the AK-47 is never going to be as viable for stealth as say the FAMAS. But for the role it's given as that old, reliable rifle that you can just pick up when shit hits the fan, the AK-47 does a fantastic job. Now the final assault rifle you unlock is the Galil Ace in 308. This serves as an endgame AK. Now while you could use the AK throughout the entire game, the Galil serves as an upgrade to its damage. And it allows you to put some attachments on it, such as extended magazines and optical enhancements. So your range increases and the damage increases, making this transition from you really feel like you're using the same gun. It still feels like the AK, however, it's better in every single regard. You're leveling up through your guns and you're feeling stronger because you've been given a stronger version of a gun you've been using throughout the game. Again, it still fulfills the same role as the AK as you can't suppress it like you could again, the FAMAS. However, within its niche, the Galil Ace is king. Now, when you got to Far Cry 5, this all got a little bit muddled, as every single assault rifle could be suppressed, given optics, and modified in whatever way you want. And while this isn't a bad thing, customization in level up systems is great because not only are you leveling up with a new gun, but you can customize that gun to either fulfill one role or another, giving you so much agency there. But this needs to be carefully balanced, otherwise you get a situation like Far Cry 5 and Far Cry 6, but we'll get into that in a second. In Far Cry 5 here, now the AK, the AR, and the M14 can all fulfill the same kind of stealth role. Of course, there's minor differences in damage and handling, but ultimately, the Sandbox is a lot weaker because you don't get that same feeling of empowerment. You're never going to feel like you did when you went from the AK-47 to the Galil Ace. Mind you, you still get that damage improvement, but you could still do a lot of the same things, a lot of the same features that make these guns feel just that, the same. At the very least, Far Cry 5 continued the series' trend of having these later guns unlock as, well, not necessarily when you go to new regions, but as you progress through the story. So even though it's majorly flawed, that progression system, that level up system of weapon sandbox building is still present. In Far Cry 6, this shit is gone. Now you can't even pick up weapons off of your enemies. Instead, what you have to do is you go around the world and you have to find these hidden boxes, open them up, and then you'll either randomly get some materials to upgrade a gun, or you'll get a new gun. And that sounds really freaking cool in theory, because after all, with an open world, you want to have these little collectibles or items that you have to go out and find. It makes the world really enjoyable to explore, and in Far Cry 6, that is the case. It's fun to go around, find these boxes, and see if you're going to get something good. It's fun to find loot like that. However, for the sake of a balanced weapon sandbox, this is terrible. Why exactly is this terrible? Well, if you watched my video on the issue with Metal Gear Solid 4's weapon balancing, a lot of the same issues we went over in that video are going to persist here. First mistake that Far Cry 6 makes. It gives you the best weapon for the early to mid game right at the start in the form of the MS-16, or M1A if you want to get technical. This weapon has superior damage to most other weapons you'll proceed to find, it suppresses really freaking well, and it has better range than, again, most of the guns that you're about to go out and find. So when you go out into the open world and you open a box and you get something like the MP5 or you get something like the Groza, there's not really a lot of reasons to use them because you already have something that's dominating the game. You would be handicapping yourself by switching over to these other guns. Same thing in the pistol category, and this kind of bleeds into the issue with the boxes in general now. I found this upgraded version of a Makarov in one of these boxes, and it's better than the pistols that I proceeded to unlock afterwards, like the Beretta. I still use the Beretta because I think the Beretta looks cool and I want to use that in the game, but again, I'm using it solely because I want to, not because it's actually the tool that's going to help me most. I already have something that's better than all of this other loot that I'm about to find. So there's no real incentive for me to experiment, at least through my first playthrough, with this entire sandbox, because the player is already given the best tools right at the beginning. And if you listen to anything I said when we were talking about the other Far Cry games, this breaks the entire level up system of gameplay. Imagine if you started Far Cry 3 or 4 with the Galil. There would be no reason to try out the early game shotguns, the AK, the SIG 550, a lot of the SMGs that you'd use for like spray and pray tactics during combat. Hell, you could even outdo the SVD sniper rifle with the Galil Ace. It would completely break the weapon sandbox and kill off all of these other guns as being viable options. That's exactly what's happening in Far Cry 6. Far Cry 6 also happens to take one of the weaknesses of Far Cry 3, well, more so 4 than 3, in the form of signature or bonus weapons that you can achieve. Now in Far Cry 3, I think the signature weapons were pretty balanced. You had to beat a certain requirement to be able to just have them available for purchase. When you got them, they still fit into the sandbox nicely as their own guns. But then as you went on to 4, a lot of the signature weapons were just better versions of what was already there and killed off any reason to really use them. And there were so many signature weapons that it was like, okay, why do I even use the normal sandbox if there's an entire other sandbox that's clearly better? In Far Cry 6, you have like this weird kind of microtransaction store, and Ubisoft gives you a certain amount of points so you can like buy a gun off of there right at the start. I, of course, buy this Kel-Tec KSG shotgun. Now, I love this shotgun to death. Okay, first off, the weird magical enchantments on it, I feel like I'm fucking Kiritsuku Emiya going out throughout Yara, fucking shit up. I love that the KSG is in this game because I feel it's hugely underrepresented in games. The last time I remember seeing it was in Black Ops 2. So it's a cool shotgun. I like the skin on it. It works great as a shotgun. I feel like Far Cry 5 really dropped the ball with shotguns, so to see Far Cry 6 pick up the ball with that was really great. But this thing was available to me at pretty much the start of the game, so now there's no reason to use any other shotguns and a lot of the other combat assault rifles or weapons like that, because this shotgun just blows everything out of the water. I even went into late game areas, and while I still got my shit caked in, this shotgun allowed me to get through a lot of encounters. So again, the game is broken because I'm given a superior tool at the start. So when I unlock the Groza, or again, the MP5, the MP40, or the other assault rifles, why would I use them if I already have the M14, the KSG, that upgraded Makarov thing? It's like I already have the best tools. But then here's the thing, it doesn't stop there with the flaws in the sandbox, because while I have all the best tools for those roles, the stealth DMR, the shotgun and pistol, I don't have something that's crucial for Far Cry 6, which is a explosive weapon. Of course, I have the dynamite that you can throw, but there are so many sections in this game where you're fighting vehicles or taking out anti-aircraft encampments, or you just generally need something really explosive. It's very similar to Far Cry 2 that way in its combat, where explosives are almost mandatory. But because these boxes are random when you open them up, and it's either going to be gunpowder or a random gun that it generates, I just haven't happened to stumble across an RPG or grenade launcher yet, so I'm at a serious disadvantage. So again, I'm unlocking all these cool other guns that I'm never really gonna need, but then the one gun that I actually need, I'm not able to unlock it because of this weird box system. It's like, again, just to end off this video and illustrate why this is really such an issue, it's like starting Far Cry 3 with the Galil Ace, the Spaz 12, the RPG, and the Shadow version of the 1911 that comes suppressed with an extended mag and optic, all at the start of the game. You wouldn't really have a reason to pick up anything else besides the fact that you wanted to, and even if you wanted to, you'd just be handicapping yourself. And that's exactly what's starting here in Far Cry 6. I have all of these choices, but only 4 or 5 really matter. Mind you, there was one section in which the level up system still showed bright and true, and that was with the evolution from M14 to the SKS. The SKS, better version of the M14. They do the same role, but again, level up system. I move on to the SKS, and I did feel more powerful. I did feel like I was progressing. Another gun that I found earlier on that kind of just devalued everything else, I found the FAL OSW, which is just a better version of the starter weapon. Now, unlike the previous Far Cry games, Far Cry 3 and 4 specifically, the starter weapon functions less like the AK in Galil and more like that SIG 552, where it's fast firing and low damage. So the starter FAL, like the SIG 552, becomes irrelevant by the time you get out of the really early stages of the game, but the FAL OSW is supposed to be a shredder version of it, and you know what? It totally is. The problem is, I unlocked it pretty early on. So again, I literally have most of the best weapons in this game before I've even really started, and that right there is Far Cry 6's gun problem. I've been Pliskin, over and out.